tendencies across the world. Following the successful conclusion of our 8th session, Mapping European Populism panel, we have embarked on a journey to explore populism beyond the confines of Europe by expanding our panel series to encompass a global perspective, aptly titled Mapping Global Populism. Our objective is to construct a comprehensive understanding of populism and authoritarianism worldwide, featuring monthly sessions. Today, we'll have our 17th session of Mapping Global Populism panel series. This session will examine the rise and reign of autocratic populism and Islamist nationalism in Turkey. As a testament to our commitment to knowledge dissemination, we're going to write a panel report and share the video recording of this panel on our website and YouTube channel. These resources serve as invaluable references for scholars, policymakers, and a wider audience concerned about the contemporary challenges to global democracy posed by populist and authoritarian politics. In the ongoing journey of our panel series, we extend our gratitude to all the scholars and experts who contribute their extensive insights. With this, we introduce our esteemed moderator and distinguished panelists for today's discussion. Today, our panel is going to be moderated by Professor Jocelyn Cesari, who holds the Chair of Religion and Politics at the University of Birmingham in the UK, and is Senior Fellow at the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace and World Affairs at Georgetown University. Since 2018, she is at the Teji Dermot Dunphy Visiting Professor of Religion, Violence and Peace Building at Harvard Divinity School. President-elect of the European Academy of Religion, her work on religion and politics has garnered recognition and awards. For example, 2020 Distinguished Scholar of the Religion Section of the International Studies Association, Distinguished Fellow of the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs, and the Royal Society for Arts in the United Kingdom. Professor Cesari is ECPS Advisory Board Member and Academic Advisor of Euroislam.info. Today, Dr. Spiros Sophos will be our first speaker to discuss the subject titled In Search of the Infant People, Continuity and Rupture in Turkey's Political Landscape. Dr. Sophos is Assistant Professor in Global Humanities at Simon Fraser University, Canada. He has held academic positions in the UK, Sweden, and Italy, including at Lund University and the London School of Economics. His research examines the intersection of societal insecurity, identity, and collective action, with a focus on Turkish politics, nationalism, populism, European Muslim identities, and populism theory. His latest book, Turkish Politics and the People, Mass Mobilization and Populism, traces the genealogy of populism in contemporary Turkey. He is the founder and lead editor of Rethinking Populism, originally launched in collaboration with Open Democracy. Dr. Emre Doğan will be our second speaker presenting on the topic Populism Transition, Continuities and Shifts in Turkey's Political Landscape, 2023 to 2024. Dr. Erdoğan is a professor at the Department of International Relations at Istanbul Bilgi University. With a doctoral degree in political sciences from Boğaziçi University, he has served as a researcher and senior consultant in various projects in academia and civil society. His research focuses on political participation, foreign policy and public opinion, child and youth well-being, methodology and statistics. He extensively studies and publishes about youth in Turkey, integration of Syrian refugee youth in Turkey, othering, polarization, and populism. Our third speaker is Ms. Hafsa Girdap, who is an adjunct lecturer in women's and gender studies at Stony Brook University in New York, where she's also a PhD candidate. She is the spokesperson and program director at Advocates of Silence Turkey and the founding member of Set Them Free, focusing on addressing women's rights violations in Turkey. Mr. Girdap's research examines human rights and the lives of Muslim women, particularly immigrant women's experience of integration and cultural identity. Her doctoral work explores self-identification and gender racialization among immigrant women from Turkey in the US, And beyond academia, she collaborates with research institutes on gender studies, incorporating the voices of women from non-Western contexts. Ms. Girdap will talk on autocratic practices of gender regime in Turkey. Mr. Ergün Babahan will be our fourth speaker, presenting on the topic Erdogan's media capture strategies and the role in founding and consolidating autocracy in Turkey. He is a senior Turkish journalist, studied law at Istanbul University. After practicing law for a year, he chose journalism as his profession. Over the years, he has worked in various prominent newspapers, including Yeni Asir, Söz, Hürriyet, Sabah, Akşam, and Star, serving as a reporter, editor, managing editor, editor-in-chief, and columnist. As editor-in-chief of Sabah, then Turkey's second largest newspaper, he successfully led the publication out of bankruptcy. Mr. Bahan has also enriched his professional experience internationally, attending the St. John Knight Journalism Fellowship Program at Stanford University through a scholarship from the German Marshall Fund. Additionally, he participated in a seminar on the American foreign policy process at the University of Maryland, supported by the Ford Foundation. The panel's fifth and last speaker is Dr. Alexandra Maria Sancerska, who will deliver a presentation on Erdogan's regime as an emerging sharp power. She's a research fellow on Turkey in the Middle East and Africa program in Poland. She graduated in international studies and international relations with an Oriental specialization from the Faculty of International and Political Studies in the University of Lodz. She received her PhD in 2024 in the field of social sciences in the discipline of political science and administration. She conducted research on Turkish domestic and foreign policy. So as a reminder, we'll have a Q&A session after the completion of the presentations. Our respected participants can write their questions in the chat box or by raising their virtual hand and pose their questions in person. Now I turn it over to Professor Jocelyn Cesari, who will provide an overview of this panel's subject matter and administrate the panel. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. If you are joining from a location where it's still afternoon, it's really a pleasure for me to be part of this discussion. Over the year, my academic research has focused on the intersection of political Islam, governance, and the rise of populist ideologies. And each time I address one or the other of this topic, I had to discuss or examine the case of Turkey. And I would just like to make a few points, overarching points about this question of Islamism and populism. When Erdogan rose to power, he was widely seen as the face of a new brand of political Islam. His early leadership emphasized Islamic values as foundation for governance, presenting them as a force for modernization and inclusivity within Turkey's democratic framework. And for a while, there was a discussion on Turkey as an emergent democracy, like a Muslim democracy. And I remember that at the time, Erdogan compared this mode of governance to the American one, based also on some religious values without being exclusive. So that was a very interesting moment. Yet over time, I would say the turning point is the Taksim protest, but it's also related to the backdrop of the Arab Spring, or so-called Arab Spring. Erdogan's leadership evolved, or perhaps transformed. His rhetoric shifted to embody the hallmark of what we call populism. And again, I'm not going to get here into a discussion on what populism is, since nobody really agrees on a definition. But let's say that it started to frame its politics as a battle between the people and the elite, the polarization of society, and an appeal to nationalism intertwined with religious identity. And here, in my view, this shift raises an important question. Are Islamism and populism synonymous? Or are they distinct strategies that sometimes overlap? Because on one hand, Islamism and populism draw on identity politics, and they draw on the virtue of the people that resist the corruption and the immorality of the political establishment. But on the other hand, they diverge in their focus. While Islam is centered on religion as a guiding framework for politics, populism looks a little more flexible, adapting its rhetoric to the immediate concern of the people And this concern can be cultural, economic, or nationalist. And from this perspective, we can see that Erdogan has moved away from a discourse centered only on Islam to engage a broader array of topics about national pride, positioning of Turkey in a regional environment. Of course, Islam is still part of it, and he presents himself as a sultan. But at the same time, if you look at the domestic policy, you do not see anymore a sort of two sides, Islamist versus secular. You see that Erdogan has realigned his alliance, including groups that were unthinkable to observe on his side, let's say in the beginning of his political career, like nationalist or even secular one. So is this the populist phase of Islamism? And that's a good question to have, knowing that Islamism is not limited to Turkey and that it's going under deep transformation everywhere. So this realignment of Erdogan opening up in terms of alliance and discourse beyond Islam, is this something that is possible elsewhere? And that's where also I am very happy to see the global comparison of this series of workshops across the globe. We see how leaders use similar strategies to harness the power of identity politics, whether through politicization of religion, like in South Asia, or the religious identity in the US populism, or the opposition between Christianity and Islam in Western Europe. So these are the major points I wanted to raise before giving the floor to this very talented array of speakers. And so without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Populism, in search of the infant people, continuity and ruptures in Turkey's political landscape by Dr. Spiros Sofos. And so Dr. Sofos, I will be very keen on the time. I took less than my initial allotted time. So I give you until 3:35 if you want to go there. That's what I have for you as time allotment. So please, the floor is yours.
Cyprios, could you please?
I saw, yes. Apologies. I hope you can hear me now. Yes. Yeah, I wanted to thank you for the introduction, and I wanted to thank ECPS for organizing this event and giving me the opportunity to share this podium with all these very well-known and excellent colleagues. Without further ado, I will try to share my screen to start my presentation. Yes. So I am trying to effectively give a genealogical twist to my discussion on populism in Turkey. And therefore, I hope you will bear with me for a few minutes talking about events that took place almost 100 years ago. But there is a point to this. So I would argue that as the Turkish Republic emerged 100 years ago, the people and the nation have been foundational elements in its discourse and its practice in many ways. As the Ottoman Empire imploded, the elites of this empire, especially those belonging to what became the Republican movement, were experiencing what we would call ontological insecurity and were prompted to search for alternative alternatives, both in terms of political architecture, but also in terms of the identity of the post-imperial that would dominate the post-imperial era. I move now to the Republican nationalism and the movement that articulated this ideology. And I would argue that it was not only anti-imperial in character, as its founders have emphasized, but also acted as an anti-colonial movement, effectively trying to break not only from the dominance of the foreign powers that were already eyeing the territories of the rump Ottoman Empire, but also effectively considering the Ottoman Empire a colonial power that needed to be defeated, both in terms of its claims to continuing the exercise of power over the territories we're talking about, but at the same time, in terms of the ideologies that it represented. And therefore, the Republic in its early stages was ambivalent about Islam, but eventually led to some form of incomplete severance of politics with Islam. It terminated the caliphate. It put under its surveillance in some ways, and Islam and the clerics. I would also argue that an essential element in the establishment of the Turkish Republic was the notion of the people and its treatment, I apologize. So the people was an essential element, and the people's enemies in many ways became constitutive others. The foreign powers, the Greeks, the British, the Russians, and other forces were considered to be imperialistic enemies. But at the same time, minorities within the Republic assumed the role of others as well. But what has not been studied a lot is the fact that the people of the Republic itself, in many ways, was implicitly declared as an enemy. Because it was not exactly a people that was worthy of the nation that was being built by the Republic. The people in many ways were too Muslim, too unsophisticated, too superstitious, too traditionalists, too Oriental in many ways to be effectively the people the Republic envisaged, modern, open-minded, and definitely free from superstitions and the influence of Islam. So in some ways, I would argue that halkçılık, which we translate as populism in many ways, an essential element of the Turkish Republic of the time, was deferred and, as I will argue later, deflected. The actual people of the Republic were disappointing and were deemed unfit to lead this Republic in many ways. Sovereignty of the people, therefore, was reimagined. And as I have argued elsewhere, the people were seen as laborers, as servants, as those who would work to eventually build the Republic and at the same time become the people that could lead the Republic. I have likened the early Republic as Dante's Purgatory, in the sense that it has served in many ways as a waiting room where the people was going to be trained, was going to eventually mature for the realization of the sovereignty. But the fact is that throughout these early years, and I would argue even today, the sovereignty of the people was almost constantly superseded and circumscribed by that of the nation. So the people were not really the sovereign in this case. And when I talk about the nation, I talk about an abstract entity, an entity that was envisioned, an entity that was in many ways, as we know, usually in the case of nationalism, more of an imagined entity than something real. I wanted to move from this now to the ways in which the early Republican elites tried to deal with the issue of their dissatisfaction with the people. And I would focus on two important elements. The first is one of the principles that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk set for the Republic. He said that the Republic was guided by the notion of inkılapçılık, which means effectively revolutionism or reformism. And I translate that through historical, focus on historical data, to envisioning the state as a state in continuous motion, as a state that was continuously having to fight the others of the nation and of the people to be, in some ways, as a state that had to reform the people and make them suitable for sovereignty in some ways. And essential in this was always is a big word, I would say frequently, an imposition of a state of exception, either legally or not so. So the state of exception meant that some elements of the Republican institutions were out of the realm of the law or were able to suspend the law. I use both ideas here about this. Just to demonstrate for a moment the way that the people was seen in this context, I would argue that the state in motion effectively assumed the role of a tutor or a guardian state that had a civilizing mission upon the noble savages of Anatolia that was supposed to reform them. I also have used the notion of lordly culture, which comes from studies of anti-colonial movements, to emphasize the strange evocation of the people as sovereign, but at the same time, the mistrust towards these people. I have here two quotes from Ataturk. I'm not going to read them for the sake of economy of time. But you can see that Ataturk is talking about the people of Turkey as, first of all, his people, and at the same time as people that need guidance. They need to be taken by the hand, and only once they prove their value as reliable Republican citizens, then they could take over the helm of the Republic. So if we want to visualize how the Republic was in many ways managing consent and legitimacy, I would say the first element would be repression. And quite often in memoirs of the early Republican era, but also later Republican eras, we can see that the face of the gendarme in the village or in the provincial towns was seen as a sign of this repression. Of course, we have states of emergency. We have other instances where we can see the coup d'etat later on that show that repression was not only personalized in the face of the gendarme, but was much more pervasive. The second element was some sort of indoctrination or training, as of course functionaries of the Republic would see it, where consent and some sort of pride in the Republic was instilled. I have here pictures from the early reforms where people, citizens were taught how to write in the Latin alphabet, how to dress, how to behave in ways that were different from those of the original people of the Republic. And the third element that I find quite important, and I think is essential for understanding populism, is the fact is the extra-institutional aspect of the state. In the case of in the time when Mustafa Kemal was alive, this meant his paternal figure, his ability to approach citizens as a caring father in many ways, and establish a rapport that made him immune to criticism and grievances of citizens against the state. In many ways, the state was repressive. In many ways, the state was demanding a lot from the citizens. But Ataturk quite often was I would say, focus of adoration and appreciation of his kindness and concern about the citizens. But of course, at some point, Ataturk dies, and what happens is that this extra-institutional element of the republic is transformed into something more violent, I would say. So I have a list of coups d'etat. Again, I'm not going to talk about them, and they represent, in many ways, one of two parallel sovereignties in the Turkish Republic. So these represent the sovereignty of the so-called nation, or at least of the Republican people that is yet to be formed, whereas the sovereignty of the people that is quite often manifested in electoral results and so on takes second stage, because this people is not worthy of being trusted, is not ready to take the helm of the republic. I'm repeating myself. So in many ways, an important element that we see here is this extra-institutional element and tutelage of the republic. A second important point is that in this context, the understanding of the political was binary. You were either a friend of the republic or a foe of the republic. And of course, the notion of the republic changed over time depending on who conducted the coups and so on. But the fact is that the binary understanding of politics, instead of a more pluralistic understanding of politics, has persisted in Turkey. And the third important element is that instead of looking at the citizen as the bearer of rights, what we see over time is that all these actions of this coup d'etat and so on posit the nation as the sole bearer of rights. So a collectivity, hard to define, hard to converse with, and hard to understand what it wants, because in many ways is indivisible and has really no voice, to be honest. Now I'm moving to the present very quickly, and I will talk about the populist moment. I'm talking about the 21st century. And I will emphasize some elements of continuity that we see in the conduct of Turkish politics today, and we have seen also emerging during the early Republican era. I will very quickly mention the national will as an important element of the democracy that has prevailed, and the national will is effectively volonté générale. It could be defined as such, and therefore it is conducive to understanding society as a pluralistic society, as a society of diversity. A corollary to that is that the people is seen as a united, homogeneous political subject, and as I will emphasize, has been identified as the sole bearer of rights, with a pinch of salt, of course, in that. Binary politics, we talked about it. And again, a corollary of this is that liberal democratic institutions have been seen quite often as divisive and as challenging the national will. Erdogan, time and again, has lashed against courts that were supposed to provide checks and balances to accuse them that they are not respecting the national will, for example. We can see that the state in motion, that notion that I identified earlier, continues as the state is seen as an agent for the transformation of the republic once more, from the republic of the Kemalists to what Christos Theazis has very aptly called İkinciler Cumhuriyeti, the Republic of the Seconds, or the Republic of the mostly pious conservatives in Turkey that were neglected when the Republic was being established, and whose displeasure has been manifested in several uprisings or expressions of dissent. So I would argue that the current state of populism in Turkey draws a lot from the Republican idiom of power, from the Republican practices, from the Republican understanding of the people as deficient, as infant, and also stresses national popular unity against, in some ways, particularism and diversity that are elements of liberal democratic politics. And of course, extra institutionality remains an important element. We had a number of instances. The Gulen movement, when it was an ally of the current president, indicates exactly this, that Turkish populism of the current era has quite often been operating alongside politics in extra-institutional domains. So I will jump this and I will go to the notion of binary politics because I consider it important. First of all, I would differ from the idea that
may I inform you, you have 2 minutes and you have already more time than it was
definitely, yes. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that, and I'm finishing. So I would say that the binary is not between Islam and secularism, but the binary is, there are multiple binaries depending on how the people is defined. And Erdogan has been very apt in defining the people in a variety of ways. And as Arditi argues, this vagueness is essential for populist politics. I would also emphasize that there have been exclusive discourses that have been deployed to other sections of the populations. The population, very similar to what Ataturk was talking about when he talked about drunkards and thugs that threatened the republic and so on. And of course, the current populist elite has been emphasizing this element of a shared feeling of being cheated, although this being cheated varies in different contexts and so on anyway. So moving to my last slide, I would like to emphasize that the structural characteristics of contemporary populism are not that different from the structural characteristics of, I would say, the Republican politics and practice. The national will, authority outside the law, indivisible leadership of a united nation and people, externalization of difference, the citizen being a citizen only if he or she, of course, belongs to the people, and therefore it is this kind of group sovereignty that is being emphasized. And of course, the fact that these people that is the bearer of rights in many ways is still mistrusted and is still not accepted as able to lead the republic. I think I will stop here. I thank you for giving me the time, and thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion.
Jocelyn, you are unmute. You are mute.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
So give the floor to Dr. Emre Erdogan, Populism in Transition, Continuities and Shifts in Turkey's Political Landscape. You have the floor until 3:51.
Okay, thank you. And I have a presentation. First, I would like to thank you for invitation to this nice meeting, and it's always a pleasure speaking after Spiros because he's very successful in giving such a long a perspective about the development of populism in Turkey. Unfortunately, I will be much more myopic and I will focus on what's happened during the last 2 years, and I will try to make some speculations about what can still remains after populism in Turkey. Okay, let's start with the context of 2023 elections. We had a lot of economic problems, such as economic instability, inflation, unemployment, and life expenses were the most important problem of the country. And only 3 months before the elections, we had natural disasters. 2 big earthquakes caused the death of at minimum 50,000 people, and we had floods in the region, etc. And we have an important problem of migration. Turkey is now hosting officially 3 and 5 million Syrians and many others. These are important problems of the country, and we are in a situation of continuous crisis, and it's very important for the populist moment, because for populist crises are opportunities indeed. That's why we had this background when we were experiencing 2023 presidential and general elections, simultaneous elections. Let's talk about actors and strategies, as Spiros gave a lot of information about the structural determinants of populism in Turkey. I will try to focus on short-term factors such as strategies, discourses, rhetoric, and performances of actors instead of talking about long-term factors. Of course, we had 4 candidates, 3.5 candidates, because President Erdogan was a candidate. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu was the candidate of the table of 6. We had Sinan Oğan, the candidate for a small party. We had Muharrem İnce. 2 days before the election, he withdrew. But I will try to focus on his rhetoric and his strategy. I believe that it gives a lot of clues about the potential of populist movements in Turkey, considering what's happening now. Okay, these are some key points about the strategies of major actors. Tayyip Erdogan, of course, he's a textbook example of populism. Almost every book written about populism gives a citation to his works. Securitization of the crisis was the most important component of Tayyip Erdogan. Classical us versus them rhetoric, the major pillar of populism. And he was acting as the safeguarder of the national unity, focusing on his leadership characteristics, and opposition was presented as an enemy. Internal and external adversaries were accepted others. There were a lot of references to ethno-religious appeals. I don't want to read of them, but you may easily find a very interesting advertisement about Hagia Sophia, which represents 4 different generations, and the victimization of Muslim values and all other stuff. And there are some very interesting advertisements about Turkish defense industry. You can easily find them, and we are working on a paper about it, how narratives are defining Erdogan's rhetoric. About the crisis is something important, because it wasn't foreseen, because we know that the government channeled a lot of funds to the economy to create a kind of false sensation of vitality. Estimated volume is more than 80 billion US dollars. During the 6 months before, starting by December, the government channeled a lot of funds through different channels, such as social aid and other stuff. And Erdogan's charismatic leadership was at the table always, and you can see, I will translate: right time, right man. There's a gendered pronunciation: right time, right man, and it was the motto of the campaign. And I personally believe that his campaign advertisements were extraordinarily qualified. discuss. And here is the candidate of the table of six. Yeah, of course, many of you may have some idea about table of six. It's the coalition, a kind of coalition, because we are under presidential regime, and under presidential regimes we cannot form coalitions. A kind of alliance, let's say, alliance of six parties, small and bigger parties, and Kılıçdaroğlu tried to form a kind of opposition movement by unifying these actors plus getting indirect, tacit approval of the Kurdish political movement. This table of six focused a lot on institutional reform, restoring parliamentary regime and other stuff, and the rhetoric was against Erdogan's polarizing governance. They tried to avoid a kind of confrontation rhetoric. They don't have a lot of visual material to analyze because their main weapon was a long, 1.5 minutes long video, let's say addressing a lot of different issues from farmers to youth to people in exile, etc., many different things. But the motto was simple: I promise. Personally, it was a kind of I language, and it's something important. They were focusing on justice, democracy, and accountability, and there was a demand for systematic change, changing the constitution, and even they prepared a constitution. But after the first round of the election, Kılıçdaroğlu changed his tone and style. He took a very nationalist, very masculine, and almost racist rhetoric to align with ultra-rightist politicians. It's something important, and we know that he changed his team. He replaced them with old guys, and we'll see what happened. This turn is very important. Until May 15, he was very peaceful, inclusive, etc. After May 15, he became another person as a strategic move, rapid strategic move. As a speculation, it costed more than 3 million votes. It's a speculation. We don't know, but there is such a speculation. And this guy is very important. He was one of the leaders of the Republican People's Party. He acted as the vice chair of the parliamentary group for many years. He was the candidate in 2018 elections who got about 30%, something like that. He lost. He set up his own political party, and he used a strange language. First, he's clearly a secular person. He underlined the importance of secular values. He criticized CHP and Kılıçdaroğlu because of their alliance with some strange politicians, etc. But he also criticized duopoly of Turkey, meaning that he criticized the government and he criticized the opposition. He attracted the support of the young people. According to some polls, he was the most popular candidate among the people between 18 to 24 years old in April. He was the most preferred candidate. He was very successful in using TikTok videos, YouTube videos, etc. And he was a typical populist politician attracting that kind of reactionary votes. He was very attractive for young voters. What happened? First round, Muammer İnce left the competition before the election, but it seems that more than 300,000 people voted for him. He wasn't a candidate indeed. Erdogan got about 50%, Kılıçdaroğlu got 44%, and Şenol got 5%. And 2 weeks later, we had the second round. There were some negotiations between different political actors. Erdogan negotiated with Sinan and Kılıçdaroğlu negotiated with Ümit Özdağ, who supported Sinan Oğan. And the day of the election, we observed that Erdogan won with 52% versus 47%. You can see that total number of votes decreased, and that's the result. This is the evidence of the cost of swift change of Kılıçdaroğlu's rhetoric between these two elections. Now Erdogan is the president. 1 year later, we had 2024 local elections. This is the most realistic map showing what happened in Turkey, because Turkey's administrative structure is complicated. We have greater municipalities, we have other provinces, etc., etc. This is at district level. It doesn't represent population size. That's why it gives a false impression, because of course, population of Western districts are higher compared to the rest of the country, but indeed you can easily see that red districts are very spread out over the country, and you can see that purple represents Kurdish political. This is the worst map for AK Party, because generally it is always yellow, but now you can see a lot of different colors. It became a colorful country, and according to some calculations, CHP municipalities control the majority of the Turkish economy now, and majority of the Turkish population. This is something important. It was a success, quote unquote. It's not easy to calculate what happened, but yeah, it's a success, clearly. Let's come back to rhetoric of Erdogan. Of course, it wasn't a live or die election for Erdogan. He didn't use that kind of rhetoric. He didn't present, say, that kind of survival of the country frame in these elections. He underlined importance of local issues, incompetence of opposition to govern the country, and he always used that kind of us versus them rhetoric. He also underlined the importance of the Islamic heritage in Turkey. He performed his polarizing performance. Of course, he didn't change that. But the most important issue is that he extensively used media. First of all, through state-controlled media. Second, government-controlled media. Third,
Emre, you have 2 minutes.
okay, I'm moving. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
one now.
Okay, let's focus on Ümit Özdağ to wrap up Erdogan extensively used. It's a new guy. It's not a new guy, of course. This is not a new guy, but of course, he's a new player. He has a strong anti-immigration rhetoric, very similar to European populism. He's almost racist. And he's using social media. His party is a one-man show. You cannot give another name. He's against all politicians, and he's criticizing the opposition. He's attacking opposition. We had Fatih Erbakan, a new player. He was the leader of anti-vaccine camp during the pandemic. He's against Istanbul agreement, etc. He's very conservative. He's attacking AK Party and quote-unquote corrupt politicians. And he competed against AK Party, especially in bigger cities. His party is not very powerful financially, but he performed well. We have two opposition leaders. Özgür Özel, the new leader of the CHP. It seems that he's not populist enough yet. He doesn't prefer a kind of antagonistic language. He prefers to restore normal politics, quote unquote, because it's a problem, the meaning of normal. And we have İmamoğlu, inverted populist, a kind of urban populist. He's a populist, we need to accept it, but he's using his love language, radical love language, to cover everyone. And he's also using a kind of religious symbolism, such as visiting Eyüp Sultan or other places. And his surname is an identity for him. Okay, what happened? You can see that the government lost a lot of votes to other parties. This green line, the green block, represents Refah Partisi, Welfare Party. They lost a lot of votes. You can see that CHP became successful to keep its votes and attract some new votes. And still you can see that some people didn't prefer to vote. These are changes in vote shares, and these are the change in the number of controlled districts. You can see that AK Party lost a lot of districts, about 1/3 of their districts. I see MHP also lost, and the winner, clear winner, is CHP, almost doubling its districts. And as I said, some districts are very. These are continuities. Polarization was the dominant theme. Us versus them dichotomy. Blaming external actors and opposition was a classic. And the control of media and communication was a kind of continue. Meanwhile, we had some divergences. Instead of focusing on national issues, leaders prefer to focus on local issues. Opposition changed its tactic. They prefer to form a coalition at the ballot box, not at the table of six, as a critic to Kılıçdaroğlu. Nationalist and Islamist narratives. Islamic narrative became more visible thanks to presence of Erbakan. I have two more slides and very simple. You can see some kind of arbitrary analysis of what's happened. You can see that Erdogan kept his language. He didn't change his rhetoric. And Erbakan's rhetoric is also very close to Erdogan. Meanwhile, you can see that opposition leaders for different ways. They focused on economic populism. They focused on governance. They didn't focus on polarization, but according to this arbitrary stuff, Kılıçdaroğlu was using this polarization issue, meaning that new leaders left this polarization language or antagonistic language. You can see that only difference between Özdağ and Erdogan is their emphasis on religious rhetoric. And it's a better presentation of what's happening and what will happen. Economic populism is the key element here. Almost every leader used this economic populism language. Meanwhile, leftist politicians focused on governance. It's a problem. We can discuss it. Governance is it an alternative populism or not? But you can see that religious rhetoric is the common denominator of Erbakan and Erdogan. And İnce and Erdogan, they were using nationalist appeals. We can say that economic populism will survive, and for the brightest politicians, this religious rhetoric will form the key element, and nationalism will be a bridge between opposition and Erdogan. These are some findings, and according to this picture, because I can say that I failed to find any evidence for the populism of Özel yet, perhaps we will see, but the opposition can use economic populism. They can speak on behalf of people, and they can focus on governance, but I'm not sure that governance is a form of populism. These are early findings, and they are very arbitrary. That's why they are open to discussion. Thank you for your patience and tolerance. I'm stopping here now.
Thank you. We are moving now to Afza Gerdap, who will present on autocratic practices of gendered regime in Turkey. So you have 15 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you, Sipros, right? I'm pronouncing correctly, and Emre for laying out the background for me, the historical context and the contemporary challenges of populism. So I'm gonna take the discussion to the gendered aspects of Islamist and autocratic tendencies in Turkey. So as just, both my colleagues mentioned that Turkey under President Erdogan's Justice and Development Party, ironic enough, the party's name, Justice and Development Party, I will refer as AKP from now on, they have increasingly embodied a gendered and Islamist framework, a populist framework, blending authoritarian governance with patriarchal and religious ideologies. And the aftermath of the 2016 coup attempt further entrenched these practices, using gender as a central axis of control, repression, and socio-political manipulation. Today, I will talk about the intersection of gendered violence, Islamist populism, and autocratic practices in Turkey, drawing on some specific cases and examples from my research and also from my civil society work, like human rights reports and etc., to illustrate their impact. And when you look at the historical and sociopolitical context of Turkey, you could see that Turkey's population includes really diverse ethnic, religious, and linguistic groups, such as, Kurdish people, Armenian people, Alevi people, and more, each facing their own unique challenges related to their identities and rights. Over the decades, successive governments in the Turkish Republic have pursued policies promoting Turkish nationalism, often at the expense of the minority communities. And these measures, these policies, practices, discourses included banning minority languages, restricting cultural and religious practices, shaping a complex and contentious history of minority rights and identity politics. And you could also see, with a very brief stance at the historical context again, the Armenian genocide, in which over 1 million Armenians were killed. Also the Kurdish marginalization, which is an always, ongoing issue. Kurds specifically faced long-standing bans on their language, music, cultural expression, with political parties often shut down or trustees appointed, imposed on municipalities. A very recent example is the detention of the Dersim co-mayor. I think it was a few days ago, and the appointment of the trustees alongside many other municipalities. And also Alevis practicing a distinct form of Islam. They have experienced, restrictions on their religious practices and exclusion from state institutions. And besides all these communities, there are other minorities, including Greeks, Jews, Jewish people, Armenians, Assyrians, Chaldeans, and many more, who still continue to endure systemic discrimination, with the state often, failing to recognize their historical grievances also and challenges. However, the gendered identities within these marginalized communities multiplies the burden on women's experiences. Women from these groups, specifically Kurdish women, have faced both ethnic and gender-based oppression. For instance, Kurdish women have been targeted in the 1990s and so forth, under accusations of supporting the PKK, a designated, globally designated terrorist group by the Turkish state, also some intergovernmental organizations. Moving beyond the aftermath of the failed coup, I say failed coup, but there are lots of political implications behind it, but I'm not going to dive into that. You could say failed coup or coup attempt in 2016. Has widened the scope of affected identities, encompassing religious women, conservative women, rightist women, besides secular women, trans women, LGBTQ individuals, and women from other minority religious traditions, and even those with the mainstream identities which align with the Erdogan's regime's so-called established, Sunni Turkish identity. For instance, just Emre mentioned Gülen movement volunteers, or allegedly affiliated with the Gülen movement. And patriarchy, as maybe the most important and biggest issue in Turkey, is deeply embedded in state and societal structures, shaping gender dynamics along hierarchical, lines. Women are often viewed as reproducers of societal values, their roles confined to biological and cultural reproduction. And the patriarchy in Turkey specifically assigns symbolic meanings to women's bodies, linking motherland concept with femininity and the state concept with masculinity, reinforcing the male dominance in state structures. And the intersectionality in oppression of all these, women from marginalized groups, as I said earlier, Kurdish, and also refugees. Nowadays, refugees coming from different nations, they all face compounded discrimination due to their gender and intersecting identities. And gendered racism, just sanctioned by the state discourses in the society, manifests in hate speech, sexual harassment, and physical violence. Barriers to education, employment, and healthcare further marginalize these women that I'm talking about. On top of all of this, as it's not enough, despite adopting the Istanbul Convention in 2011 to combat violence against women, Turkey withdrew from the convention in 2021 when the femicide cases, sexual harassment, and violence against women increased drastically, strengthened by the state's discourses. This withdrawal inflamed gender-based violence and femicide, undermining years of progress in women's rights, even if it's not a very ideal state, but there was progress. So before diving into the current Islamist populism and identity politics, I must once again, highlight the secular and religious patriarchies embodied in Turkey's regimes in the historical context. Both secular and Islamic frameworks perpetuate traditional roles for women, confining them to familial or community spaces, assigning lots of, state-related roles or duties to their bodies. And this divide, secular and religious divide, particularly under Turkey's hegemonic secularism, portrays unveiled women as modern and religious women as traditional, reinforcing the binary framework in women's identities. And AKP's, Erdogan's party, Islamist populism has intertwined religion with nationalism. Emre mentioned that, religious populism can be said as, affiliated with Erdogan or, Erbakan, the milli görüş understanding. And nationalist, discourse is kind of, affiliated with the secular and leftist or Republican discourses. But what Erdogan did is, much more worse, combining them all together, religion and nationalism, creating a very much wider divisive narrative of us versus them, polarizing the community, the society, to a place where there is no, going back kind of, situation. And in that, women's roles and identities are central to this discourse, shaped by the conservative and patriarchal expectations, which is, positions mothers as women as mothers, homemakers, and embodying the national's moral fabric. And the policies in that discourage women's public engagement, emphasize conservative family roles, and reinforcing the gender inequality. I remember that Bülent Arınç, one of the high-profile representatives within the AKP government, he was criticizing, condemning women laughing in the public. We cannot laugh in the public, according to Bülent Arınç or Islamist, discourse. And religious identity has been very successfully instrumentalized in AKP's, discourses and practices. The lifting of the headscarf ban in public institutions was framed as a victory for women's rights, democracy, gender equality, but actually primarily a political, strategy to consolidate conservative support. I think it was 2013 when the ban was lifted. And feminist and feminist movement, secular women in that discourse are often vilified as agents of Western imperialism, as threats to Turkish Islamic values. And the coup in 2016 intensified gender and political repression, including women who are critical of the regime, including academics. Emre mentioned them in a highly, wider perspective. Academics, journalists, activists, or even women having nothing to do with politics, housewives, teachers, doctors, they all have faced harassment, imprisonment, and physical violence. I'm talking about all these facts from my research, drawing from my research, which have been conducting in the field, speaking to subjects themselves. I don't want to say, victims, maybe survivors, and also experts. But also, besides my academic career, I also work for an NGO I mentioned earlier, the Advocates of Silence Turkey. We have been working on, several reports which archives and, showcases the human rights violations. And ultimately, and unfortunately, we have been seeing a lot of cases that arbitrary detentions, strip searches, threats of sexual violence has become tools of state oppression, which have been embraced and welcomed by the society, unfortunately, and I don't know, scaringly. And this gendered violence, this is a kind of a anecdote here I want to mention. This gendered violence has driven thousands of women to leave Turkey. Forced migration between 2016 and 2019, over 400,000 citizens, as much as recorded, nearly half of them women migrated, citing untenable living conditions due to the state-led persecution. And the impact of this gendered populism, Islamist populism, and violence is widely prevalent in the country and even beyond borders, considering the transnational repression practices of Turkey in different countries. And they have institutional consequences too, because AKP has systematically curtailed feminist organizations, and they delegitimized feminist activism, linking it to foreign interference. And state rhetoric portrays feminism as incompatible with Turkish and Islamic values, fostering societal polarization. Again, withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention, which marked a significant repression in addressing the gender-based violence, domestic violence, state violence, aligning with the regime's patriarchal agenda, women have been increasingly confined to gender roles, with policies discouraging public and political engagement. I again remember one of the religious scholars, I don't want to say scholar, charlatan maybe, he was giving a public speech and he said that the women of, or the wives, the daughters of those, dissidents are war spoils. We can have them. So that's why I'm always saying that state-led, state-sanctioned violence, welcome and embraced by the society, because religious elites are empowering these discourses and policies too. Coming to the end, yeah. Last two or
1 minute. You have 1 minute, okay.
1 minute. Oh,
Yeah.
1 minute, okay. Ironically. So despite all this repression, women in Turkey still continue to resist the violence of state and society, and the regime is actually afraid of women because they can organize in power, they can mobilize in power, and most importantly, in solidarity with global movements, transnational movements. And to wrap up, I want to say that women in Turkey navigating intersecting oppression actually show us that the Turkish case underscores the need for global feminist movements addressing the interplay between populism, religion, gender oppression, fostering, inclusive strategies for justice and equality. And I'm telling this all by my heart as both an activist and civil society leader and an academic. Thank you.
Thank you. I give now the floor to Ergun Babahan. Erdogan's media capture strategies and their role in founding and consolidating autocracy in Turkey. The floor is yours for 15 minutes.
Hi, I think I am and Bülent are the two people here who know Erdogan personally. I was very close to Erdogan once upon a time when he founded his party and traveled Anatolia. I was with him. When he became the prime minister, I was the editor-in-chief of Sabah. So I went to every part of the world with him. Ertuğrul Özkök from Hürriyet and Ekrem Dumanlı. In that time, he used to keep his pool very limited. Usually 3 editor-in-chiefs of biggest and influential newspapers in Turkey. And then he widened it as he got to control most of the media. Actually, Turkish media was never free and independent. Kemalist regime taking over from İttihat Terakki Party took the same model as they developed an idea of republic, and they use 3 things to create a Turkish nation, because there wasn't any Turkish nation in Anatolia: education, compulsory military service, and media. Mustafa Kemal supported small media groups, including Cumhuriyet. Cumhuriyet was founded in an old house taken over by an Armenian family. Also, the CHP gave the necessary funds for Cumhuriyet to buy the printing machines, etc. And during the one-party regime until the 50s, the state was the only decision maker about media and Turkish problems. After 50s, Turkish media got a differentiation. I mean, there were conservative media, nationalist media, etc., liberal media kind of, but they were all under the state control. They could make stories about the government, mayors, economic issues, etc., but there were taboo subjects which they cannot write about, even discuss about. One was Kurdish issue. The second was Armenian genocide, Pontus genocide, Cyprus. You should always support Turkish Cyprus or occupied Cyprus as a part of Turkey. Relationship with Armenia. These were the subjects decided and controlled by the military tutelage system. Until Erdogan came to power, we couldn't use the word Kurd in media. With his reforms and our hope that we are going to be a part of European Union, Turkish media started using Kurdish freely and talking about the problem Kurdish people suffered since the foundation of the republic. Erdogan was lucky in this subject because he came to power with the support of Washington, which hated the military regime because their anti-European Union stance, because they believed that if Turkey joins the European Union, Kurds will get their governance as in a federative system, or mayors get very powerful and get control of eastern and southern part of Turkey. That's why they were against the European Union. That's the point where Washington invited Erdogan even before he was elected, and sat down with President Bush and talk about the path he's going to take and things he's going to do. So he had a kind of hostile media, except Sabah. Sabah was always pro-European Union, and when he came to power financially, and ownership base was kind of weak. We didn't have a base of ownership. The company actually belonged to the state, but we were restructuring it to buy it from the state-owned financial institution. And we were kind of natural ally of Mr. Erdogan. And he had Yeni Şafak, which was getting stronger every day with his support, financial support. And then you had Gülenist media, which supported Erdogan without any question. And we now are learning that they even expressed some kind of stories that were harmful for Erdogan's power, etc. So there was only Cumhuriyet, which is a very nationalist Republican-based newspaper, and Doğan Group. Doğan Group was a tool of military tutelage system. Erdogan's main problem was to deal with them, but Turkey was going through a societal transformation, and Doğan Group was very effective in the military, bureaucracy, some part of judicial system and academia. But Erdogan started controlling all of them with the support of pro-European Union policy and support of Washington, and easily eliminated all critical media. But he didn't like only the problems about the relationship with the military or the media's treatment of religious people. When we made stories about the roads he built was in terrible shape, he didn't happy with that either. If you criticized his economic policies, he didn't enjoy it either. He was calling other day the owner of the paper and complaining about the stories. So this is his character. Once we were on a trip to the States or South Asia, I can't remember rightly. He told me personally, I told him, you are very powerful. Why are you afraid of the media? You didn't need media support to come to power. He told me, you don't need media to come to power, but to stay there, you need the media. Without it, you cannot keep your power alone. So it was his policy to control all the media. After these corruption stories, famous corruption stories, he got a chance to control all the media. First, he started with Sabah Group, which I was a part of my whole professional life. State took control back and he bought it personally. He collected money from business people. He made the down payment, $1 billion, $200 million, and collected half of it from the business people, the rest from public banks, and now he's practically owner of it. Then after this coup d'etat attempt, or so-called coup d'etat, he consolidated his power with the support of his old enemies, what we call derin devlet. He brought all people back from their cells and used them against Jemaat and Kurdish politicians. At that time, Doğan Group was very weakened. He forced him to sell it, one of his guys, Demirören. Now, if you say he owns Sabah, Hürriyet, two biggest groups in Turkey. He controls Yeni Şafak. He controls TRT, 10 channels. I don't know, Doğuş Group, and all the small groups. You can't name enough. 500, more than 500 channels all over the Turkey. People follow them, listen them, and get their information through them and shaped by them. Kemalist regime used media to create a Turkishness, awareness of Turkishness, and a world outside waiting to divide Turkey, occupy Turkey, knee Turkey down again. And Turkish concept of understanding the world shaped by this policy. I mean, in this sense, conservative or pious people are not different than the secularist people. Every Turk believes that the Western world are waiting at the doors of Turkey to occupy, if cannot occupy, conquer Turkey or divide Turkey by using Kurds. Kurds are not demanding their democratic rights, but they are being used by the Western powers as they had been used during the Ottoman Empire and created Greeks, Bulgaria, Albania, etc. This is the psychic of Turkish society, and very useful for Mr. Erdogan to use it to his own advantage. Still doing it today, as you can see. All the elected mayors are being taken away and put in the jail, and these cities are now run by people like governors or deputy governors, and media always supporting them. Even the secular so-called opposition media supports Erdogan Kurdish policy. He managed to change the society, not only with his financial tools, but mostly his using media. As you can notice, never his deputies or ministers can go on television. Only he goes on television and speaks for policy. The rest, he uses media or academic people to speak for AKP politics, because he doesn't want anyone to be a rival for him in AKP politics. He doesn't want any other star in the party.
Orgun, you have 1 minute left.
Okay. So if you look at the history, I say it was the easiest thing he managed to do was to control the media, because there was a media atmosphere, media ownership ready to be controlled by Erdogan. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm giving the floor now to Dr. Alexandra Spancerska, Erdogan regime as emerging sharp power. Dr. Spancerska, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
First of all, thank you for having me. So it is my pleasure to participate in this panel. Thank you, Bülent, for your invitation. I really appreciate that. And Emre, it is great to see you once again. Hopefully, we will see each other at the end of January in Ankara. So yeah, today I'm gonna talk about the sharp power, which represents a novelty in the study of international relations. So it was a part of my PhD dissertation. So this concept was introduced by American scholars Christopher Walker and Jessica Ludwig in 2017 at the International Forum for Democratic Studies. So it is quite new. And in the so I will focus on explaining this concept because maybe not all of our listeners are familiar with this concept. So I will try to explain it, and then I will, in the second part of my speech, I will characterize the different areas of Turkey's activity in international forum in terms of sharp power, and I will focus in particular on technology, modern forms of censorship, political dissidents, and Turkish diaspora abroad. So yeah, when it comes to sharp power, Walker and Ludwig pointed out that democratic states have long ignored. So basically, they are focusing on China and Russia. But in my PhD dissertation, I wanted to focus on Turkey. But they start to analyzing Chinese and Russian government efforts to build modern tools of influence. And so these countries' initiatives in the media were repeatedly seen as authoritarian expression of vanity, which are not worth to pay attention by the audience. So they found it necessary to create a new vocabulary to describe soft power in relation to authoritarian states. So sharp power has the effect of limiting free expression and distorting the political environment. It is called sharp because it seeks to pierce, penetrate, or performate the political and informational environment of targeted countries. So one of the best well-known examples of sharp power is Russia's interference in foreign elections, for example, in US, in the in Trump campaign. It was a few years ago. So the goal is weakening the health and credibility of democratic regimes. Basically, the United States, the European democracies, they are subjected to increasingly sophisticated Russian interference over the past decades. So now let me move on to the second part of my speech. I will focus on Turkey. In Turkey, authoritarian processes in both media and digital spaces have intensified over the years. The most important event initiating this phenomena on Turkish social media was protest in Gezi Park. The demonstrators have taken advantage of the online space on Twitter to organize the efforts to challenge the authoritarian's decision. So during this time, there were multiple violation of civil rights during the events in Gezi Park, and the state administration decided to control social media. So on the one hand, it was a positive sign to revive civil society activities in Turkey. On the other hand, it prompted the governmental camp to intensify authoritarian actions, and it was an initiating factor for troll activity on Turkish social media. So after the Gezi Park events, the phrase AK Party political trolls became widespread in Turkish discourse. So when we are talking about the trolls, so-called trolls, they are pro-governmental internet users whose productive engagement with authorities through social media networks can be seen as a form of digital surveillance, which in turn carries restrictive consequences for citizens belonging to the opposition. So the connection between trolls and AKP is proven by the fact that in 2020, the Twitter administration closed more than 7,000 accounts that repeatedly interacted with accounts of the government camp. So the trolls can act as a form of social lynching. They are also able to acquire accounts on social media and then use them for their own purposes. Another practice is using automatic bots to counter-react to the discourse against AKP. They can also use other languages than Turkish to influence, for example, foreigners critical of AKP policies. As far as I know, there are no clear evidences that AKP authorities have formalized the activities of trolls, but their dependence on the camp can be proven. So one of the examples, it is, for example, a so-called war between Turkish and Russian trolls after Turkey shut down the Russian bomber on the Turkish-Syrian border in 2015, when the Russian embassy in the UK posted a series on Twitter post portraying Turkey as a state facilitating the so-called Islamic State alt-right. Turkish trolls responded by spreading the anti-Russian hashtag troll state Russia, which means Russia is a troll state. So from my perspective, currently the most disturbing phenomena is the activity of the trolls in languages other than Turkish to legitimize Turkey's unilateralist policies in international forums, as well as actions targeting foreigners who shape the public discourse on Turkey in the country and do not replicate the AKP narrative. So when it comes to the modern forms of censorship, 2 years after Turkey's transition to a presidential system, the government introduced legal provisions requiring registration for social media companies such as Facebook and obliged them to store user data in Turkey and respond to the government request and remove content deemed offensive. So AKP justified the new legislation with need to protect citizens from cybercrime and slander. Another form of the government's control of information sphere in the state was the establishment of the Center for Combating Disinformation. It was created within the Presidential Communications Directorate, which is headed by Fahrettin Altun. The center was established to counter systematic disinformation campaigns against Turkey. So they are preparing a weekly disinformation bulletin. So in other words, the governmental body has been given a mandate to combat disinformation, but it raises as serious concerns, especially in a country where the governing camp deliberately confuses critical journalism with disinformation. So it is the crucial point here. Also, when we are analyzing sharp power concept, we have to remember that it is also a part of transnational authoritarianism. Turkey, like China, Russia, is abusing Interpol's red note mechanism to go after regime opponents. Let me remind you about the example of Turkey's demand for the red note from Interpol in the case of journalist Can Dündar. Other example, in 2016, Bulgaria, a member state of the European Union, extradite Turkish businessman Abdullah Büyük, who was accused by Turkish authorities of having ties with Fethullah Gülen movement. So acting prime minister at the time, Boyko Borisov, described this deportation as an act on the edge of law, and justified this decision on the grounds that he wanted to avoid the risk of mass influx of refugees from Turkey. He also pointed out that it is very important for Bulgaria to maintain good relations with Turkey. So here the example of Bulgaria, which is a European Community member, and they submitted to the demands of AKP authorities, which also shows that the AKP can use their ability to interfere in the issues of other countries and their domestic policy. So it is also a manifestation of sharp power in a Turkish foreign policy. So in other words, Bulgaria was willing to violate human rights in order to maintain support from Turkish authorities. Also important aspect is manipulation of national diasporas. Turkish diaspora has both positive and negative functions. On the one hand, it can promote the nation's interest abroad, carries out lobbying activities, so it can be used as a soft power tool. On the other hand,
Alexandra, you have 1 minute.
okay, after the coup attempt, it became a sharp power tool because for the AKP, they decided to use Turkish diaspora to follow the opposition members of diaspora abroad, for example, in Germany, in Brussels. So they are using Turkish diaspora in an instrumental way to invigilate and repress opposition groups operating abroad. So yeah, this is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are going now to open to questions to the audience. So my understanding is I will take the one that I see in the chat. Do we have Do we give the people the possibility to raise hands or not? It's not clear to me. That has not been explained to me.
Yes, both of the ways can be used.
Okay.
Chat and the react button.
So I have a very long question here. Actually, three questions. So I'm going to go through them while people may think of asking further points. So can anyone, first question is about Erdogan as a post-populist. I'm not sure what this means because it means that he has been in charge for a long, long time and he has managed genuine pragmatic success. So does it make him a post-populist? I would say he's a populist, period. That's what makes populist, you know, the capacity to make people believe that they represent the real interest of the people. And he has done a pretty good job at doing that. Anybody who wants to have a take on that question? Okay, so the second question is, can anyone speak to the role of the military in populist times? And there is a reference here to Pakistan. So how does it play out in Turkey? Anybody wants to take on that? Again, if I may say so, from a very comparative approach, military position has more to do most of the time with authoritarian regime, what is called, you know, the military power being behind a political facade, a Praetorian regime. Praetorian regime don't have to be populist. Populist can be Praetorian, but the two are not synonymous right there. So I would say that probably Pakistan is a Praetorian regime. I'm not sure that Pakistani leaders are populist, but if you have any other position, I'm also happy to take it. And the third question is directly aimed at Afza's presentation. Critics may argue that patriarchal excesses are the same under non-populist regime. The person who has said that she has argued that piety politics gives an extra and moral cover to Muslim populists as they drive unchecked authoritarianism more than secular feminism. So it's not about binaries, but oppositional gender goals. Can Afsa speak about that?
So I'm trying to understand the question, properly. So, yeah, patriarchal powers is not just only a populist, tool or proxy. Yeah, and also religion for populist leaders can be utilized as a tool or proxy to manipulate society, individuals, groups, or rhetorics, and also the gender, dynamics within the context. But in Turkey, the secular, even if the secular or the religious, or conservative, political leaders, shifting power in the regime, they in different directions maybe, but they both used, this populist, tool of the religious or patriarchal power through different means, banning or lifting the ban, or addressing a women community as modern and addressing a women community as, backwards. And then when the power switch, then the same groups switch roles too. The modern group becomes, deviant or Western imperialist group, whereas the other one becomes the established women group. So yes, patriarchy autocrat practices through the religious and nationalist discourses can manifest in different, directions or in different manners, but the very common ground, the common denomination as the religion and nationalism remains there, even if the directions change. I don't know if I could, answer your question, but that's how I understood the question.
Thank you. There is another question for Emery. Emery, what are your predictions when it comes to the future of the CHP under the leadership of Özgür Özel? And second, what are the prospects of resuming talks between the government and the PKK, sorry?
And not before next presidential election, it is not easy to go back to the normal. That's why if there is one populist at the room, everyone needs to be populist. It's a kind of rule. You cannot against the wind. That's why we need a kind of populism. But what kind of populism? Chantal Mouffe once discussed possibilities of a kind of left populism or positive populism, but it didn't work in Greece. It failed. It didn't work in Spain. It didn't work in Italy. It means that it is a kind of oxymoron, left populism. And that's why we can see that we will have a kind of populism. I hope that kind of populism will be much more liberal compared to the existing one, less discriminatory, but it's not easy. The issue is that if the opposition needs a kind of populism, of course, they can use economic populism. They can talk about people's restaurant, people's gardens, etc., etc. They can talk about the needs of the ordinary people. They can talk about equality, fairness, justice, increasing a minimum wage, making tax reforms, etc. They can advocate a kind of progressive stuff. But the issue is that many populist issues, they are related with cultural stuff. We are talking about tolerating LGBTI or not, tolerating ethnic minorities or not, or desecretizing the Kurdish question. They are all related with that one, and it's not easy to act against these problems. I personally believe that there may be a kind of tension. I'm not talking about a conflict or that kind of stuff. I can say that there may be a kind of tension within the party. I personally believe that Özgür Özel sincerely believes in the merits of non-antagonist politics. He believes in that. The major issue is that advocating non-antagonistic politics, non-polarizing politics, he believes in the merits, but there is huge criticism against him within the party. And there is a tension for advocating a kind of antagonistic politics, polarizing, using the advantage of polarization, etc. It's a tension. There may be another alternative led by İmamoğlu, soft populism. But yeah, all of these political stuff will be a result of within party conflict. That's the problem. It will be a result of conflict between different parties, groups, different factions, different leaders, etc., etc. It won't be a kind of strategical choice. This is my perception. As you can see, I cannot foresee. Yeah, but flip.
Thank you. I see two hands, Bulent, Kenneth, and then Melik. First.
Yeah, actually, thank you very much for these intriguing discussions and wonderful presentations that we are actually very familiar with on the field. I have two questions, actually. One of my questions to Alexandra. I wonder how she could draw a bold line between the other powers, like soft power, hard power, or smart power. The sharp power is the fourth of them. And especially I wonder what is the real difference between soft power and public diplomacy in regard of sharp power. Also, another question for Emre Erdoğan, Professor Erdoğan. I wonder really whether he trusts in the election results as a reliable and objective sources to make a political analysis over that, or agree with some speculations that the elections in Turkey is not democratic in any sense, both the campaign process in before the elections and even the operation of the elections. Thank you.
I also take the question of Malik, and then I give the floor to the panelist. Please, Malik.
Thank you. That was very interesting. I do also have a PhD on I'm writing dissertation on Turkey foreign policy on keen relative religious and diaspora in Georgia. I have visited around 30 mosques here, and I see in the first field work, the first hand of experience of Turkish foreign policy. My question is, I listen to each of the panelists, and it looks like, is it the populism in Turkey historically rooted, or is it limited to political parties? So if we would be in 1960, the topics will be different than today, or let's say after post AKP, would be the populism will be, we mentioned about the soft populism, will be much different. And so I see that whether maybe it's the indicators. So what is the correlation between the Turkey populism with its geopolitical underpinnings, or it could be geography, it could be geopolitical, they mentioned about the hard history, historical, linguistic, cultural. So what is it really? Looks like we are, to me, we are missing the big picture, the problem that the populism emanate from, not to leading to the result. Thank you. And my question, not to specific any panelist, anybody can just kick in and answer the question if they possibly do. Thank you.
Thank you. So referring to the first question, I will give the floor to Alexandra and then Emery. And after that, everybody wants to give a shot to Malik's remark. Okay, Alexandra, please.
Yeah, thank you, Bülent, for this question. So yeah, basically the one of the important distinguishing feature of the AKP's policy, it is a party's ability to simultaneously use public institutions as soft power and sharp power tools. For example, let's take a example of a so-called mask diplomacy. Yeah, it is a part of public diplomacy. Yeah, because it can be used as a soft power tool by building Turkey's positive image as a state with a leadership role of Islamic world. It is used in Africa, in Somalia, for example, in the Balkan regions, and so on. So it can be used in positive way as a soft power tool. On the other hand, in the same time, the same institution can be used as a sharp power tool. For example, let's take a look on the examples in Europe, in Germany, Austria. They can be easily transformed into sharp power tool. In this case, when in the imams are subordinated to Diyanet, they have opportunity to make mosque spaces available for the meetings. For example, of meeting lobbying groups linked to the government camp or to the Turkish intelligence meet, so they can cooperate and persecute political dissidents abroad or influence decision makers in the host country. So I think the crucial thing is they can use the same tools like public institutions, both in the same time as a soft power tool to create a positive image of Turkey. So it is well and well known and well recognized in Africa, for example, in Balkans. On the other hand, from our perspective, like in Poland, it is perceived negatively when it comes to, for example, Moscow diplomacy, Turkish Moscow diplomacy in Europe, in such countries like Germany, Austria. So they can use the same tool to invigilate the Turkish political dissidents abroad, because these people can be the supporters, for example, of the Gulen movement. Yeah, so it is. I think it is. That's the point.
Thank you, Emery. Do you want to say something in a couple of minutes before I wrap up this?
Yeah, very short answer. Yeah, you are right that there are too many questions, but the issue is that democracy is a process. Yeah, democracy is not limited with counting votes. Generally, when we are talking about the quality of democracy or the fairness of elections in Turkey, we are focusing on, do we count votes fairly or not? But the issue is that voter registration is a problem. Opinion formation as a result of the existing media system, social media, state domination, etc., is a problem. Opinion expression is a problem. And voting in many places is safe, but in some provinces it's not safe, especially in southeastern region. Counting, even the opposition party cannot control 1/4 or 1/5 of total ballots. Okay, this is the major opposition party. We don't know how many ballot boxes they don't have the control. They cannot count. And another problem, we are ignoring transformation of votes to seats. Our electoral system is biased, and it's a presidential system, meaning that if you get 1 + 50%, you got the country. This is the unfair. This is the most unfair representation system. That's why we have too many problems about. I'm not talking about inner party democracy. I'm not talking about how we are electing candidates, how we are electing mayors. There are too many problems. Not only counting, not only calculating 50% of votes shifted, etc. The problem here is that most important problem of this country is how we are forming our opinions. This is something important. Are we informed citizens? Do we have access to fair and equal information provided by all parties? There is huge voter suppression everywhere in this country. Many people, they are suppressed for many years, even under the best days of Turkish democracy during 1960s. Can we talk about a good democracy? We have all kinds of problems, but all of us, we are focusing on, did we count fairly or not? Yes, I can say that this is the fairest part of this electoral process. Be sure about it. We are counting votes fairly, but the rest is a mess.
Thank you. We are already on top of the hour, and I would like to wrap up. I'm sorry for the few questions that remain on either on the YouTube or right there with us. But my job now is to try to bring this together. And I apologize because I'm going to have to leave before the closing remarks of our host. I have another meeting. I thought we were finishing at 6, so apparently we at 5:30. Sorry. Oh, I don't know which time we are anymore, but I am on a different time zone than you, so I will have to close up and leave. So if I can do a recap here, it was fascinating for me to see that all of you use the terms in different meanings. There is nationalism, there is authoritarianism, there is populism, and there is Islamism. And they are not all synonymous. And it's fascinating that Turkey can be put in any of this group at a different period of time. For nationalism, and this goes back to the first presentation of Spiros, what you are describing is a nation building in all its features. What is interesting, and that happened to a lot of countries, the state leaders come before the nation. Ataturk knows what is good for the people. There is no Turkish nation. So this has to be done in an authoritarian way. You cannot just work on the consensus of people. That's where the contractual philosopher, the Enlightenment, had it wrong, because there had been battles and fight, and then you can discuss what brings you together. But all nations I have studied since post-colonial time have been built from top down. We were talking about Pakistan, Turkey, you look at all of them. So interestingly, these features remain, indeed, that's what you call this extra-institutionalism, that remain there. That's part of the political culture. It doesn't mean that it's populism. And populism, we can argue what it means, but it means two axes. On the horizontal, the movement that is not automatically a party will say, I represent everybody. We don't make any difference, and we are against the elite. So populism is not anti-people. It's anti-elite. So I don't think that Ataturk was a populist in this sense. He was building a nation and putting himself also in the elite sense, meaning he was not putting himself outside this new nation or national community that he was building. And then comes the question of authoritarianism. I mean, we are far beyond, and this goes back to the last discussion, there is no more distinction between democratic and non-democratic. All the scholars and experts talk about hybrid regime. So what are we talking when we say Turkey is not democratic? Is it the vote? Is it the separation of power? Is it the civil liberties? Even France has been recently put back on the ranking because of the lack of civil liberties and respect of religious freedom. So what is at stake in the Turkish case? People vote. We hear that there are questions about the legitimacy of the vote. For me, it seems that it's really the level of confusion of powers I mean, the presidential turn, and it's about civil liberties, what we heard about the repression of different freedom of expression and press and so on. And populism is really a movement that discards the traditional political party, saying we don't need them, we can have a connection directly with the people, and we are working against the established the political establishment or political elite. And this can indeed be, that was fascinating. At some moment, Erdogan carried this discourse even when he was in the political institution and running them. So that is quite an interesting positioning that, in my opinion, explain also his longevity right there. But again, so we have to be clear of what these terms mean and how they can be compared. And Islamism can be a form of religious populism, but I will stop there because we have someone wants to talk.
So I will take it from here. Thank you so much. Dear distinguished panelists, thank you very much for these very insightful presentations, and Professor Cesari for your great moderation and assessments. Thank you so much. Dear attendees, your questions, many questions indeed, and remarks greatly enriched this panel discussion. Please mark your calendars for your upcoming on December 19th, 2024. Can you hear me now? Because I think I had lost my connection.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Thank you. Be sure to register and join us as we explore populism and autocracy in the Gulf countries on December 19, 2024. So I wish you all a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.